Lucian lived around 120 to 190 AD and was a satirist from Samosa. In the first monologue, Mr. Bass is talking to a Mr. Bean about the golden years. In the second monologue, Lord Dinwiddie is talking to Lord Marlborough about a plan all gone wrong.
You missed out, Mr. Bean. The golden years were really something. I could do what I liked. There was still plenty of beautiful women and fine bottles of wine to enjoy. I became known for my extravagant parties. Oh, I never paid a penny out of my own pocket. All of these things were gifts, you see, from my many admirers. Only the cream of the crop was allowed in my presence. The best society had to offer, the brightest and most beautiful. Young gods and goddesses, all eager to please. They had eyes only for me. I was just as you see me now, old, bald, bleary-eyed, arthritic, and the object of all desire. I had to beat them off with a stick. I should have thought you knew the violent passion for old men who have plenty of money and no children. Oh, but I assure you, Mr. Bean, I nevertheless took a great deal of satisfaction in my young lovers. They idolized me, showered me with gifts through parties. I had an almost godlike power over them. They couldn't refuse me anything. A discovery that came in particularly handy with the ladies. Sometimes I would play games, cut some of them off. Such rivalries you wouldn't believe, such jealous competition. I promised to make each of them my sole heir, and they believed me, every one of them. Little piggies. If they'd ever had an honest conversation with each other, they would have figured it out. But they didn't. They just pranced around, secretly laughing at the others, secure in the knowledge that they would win out in the end. Of course, my actual will told them all to go hang. The actual beneficiary was my maid, a beautiful girl, about 20. I'm sure you can guess her job description. Well, I'll say this. She deserved the money more than they did. Of course, she didn't love me either, but she was honest about the whole thing. Well, she didn't put on airs like the rest of them. And they all treated her like dirt. Now, they can kiss her derriere.
You remember Lord Carlsbad? Lonely old bugger, lots of money, no children. Well, I'd spoken kindly to him on occasion. Even took him out to dinner once or twice. He was so grateful that one day, quite out of the blue, he promised to make me his sole heir. His sole heir is worth millions, you understand? I couldn't believe my luck. I hadn't asked for it, never thought of it really. But from that day forward, in order to show my appreciation, I began to spend practically every waking moment in his company. I would drop by first thing in the morning. We'd play checkers, shuffleboard. At first, it wasn't so bad. Not terribly exciting, but I'd just think of the money, and that would keep me going. After a few weeks, though, I began to run out of steam. He liked to tell war stories. Never actually fought in a war, mind you. Spent most of the war typing in some office in Liverpool. Now try to imagine, if you will, war stories that involve typing. An occasional flirtation with a grumpy secretary, or a heated debate over the proper use of the semicolon. It was interminable. I knew I couldn't keep it up much longer. But still, the inheritance. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had already spent most of it in my head. I began thinking up ways to hurry him along, if you know what I mean. Little things at first. I convinced him to take up cricket. I thought the exertion might be too much for his heart. But it only made him healthier, and suddenly he looked 10 years younger. I took him boating. I thought he might fall in and drown. I even went so far as to rock the boat a little. But the old bugger had impeccable balance. And worse luck, he always wore a life jacket. I began to get desperate. Finally, I decided to approach the butler. Now, he was an unhappy little man, bitter that he himself had been overlooked for the inheritance. Together, we concocted a plan. Are you familiar with ricin? It's a powerful poison, extracted from castor beans of all things, twice as deadly as cobra venom. The butler agreed to administer the poison the next time his master called for wine, which he did constantly. He was a drunken sot. And in return, I promised to reward the poor fellow for all his years of loyal service, something his master had never done. The next evening, after our usual activities, the servant brought in 2 cups, the poisoned one for Carlsbad, the other for me. Unfortunately, the incompetent oaf got nervous, switched the cups somehow, gave me the poisoned one. And in a few minutes, much to my surprise, there I was, dead, on the floor, and cheated out of my inheritance. Oh, I suppose you'd think it's funny. And so did the old man. After he got over the initial shock, he put it all together, I guess, and laughed hysterically at his butler's mistake. Lesson learned the hard way by Lord Dinwiddie. If you want something done right, do it yourself. Good night.